The shores of Latium lay before them, green and silent beneath the sun. Yet peace was far from their grasp. Aeneas knew that destiny was never gentle. The land promised by prophecy was not a gift freely given, but a prize to be won through struggle and sacrifice. He stepped upon the soil with reverence, feeling the weight of centuries yet unborn pressing upon his shoulders. Around him, his companions gazed with weary hope, their faces lined by years of wandering, their hearts yearning for rest. But rest would not come easily, for in this land dwelt kings and warriors, proud and fierce, who would not yield to strangers without blood being spilled. The first days were filled with omens. In the sacred groves, voices whispered from the rustling leaves, and flames danced upon the altars without consuming the wood. Aeneas sought counsel from the priests, and their words were grave. A war was written in the stars, a war that would blaze before peace could bloom. Yet they spoke also of triumph, of a throne that would rise from ashes, of a city whose name would echo through all ages. These words burned in Aeneas's heart, a fire that no storm could quench. He sent envoys to King Latinus, ruler of the land, bearing gifts and words of peace. Latinus was old and wise, his eyes deep with thought, and he listened with patience. He knew the signs, the prophecies that spoke of strangers who would come to mingle their blood with his own. He welcomed Aeneas with honor, offering his daughter Lavinia as bride, a union that would bind their peoples together. But fate is never without strife, for in the shadows lurked Turnus, prince of the Rutulians, proud and fiery, whose heart burned with love for Lavinia, and rage against the foreigner who sought her hand. His voice rose like thunder in the councils, stirring warriors to arms, and soon the land trembled with the march of war. The days that followed were dark with smoke and steel. Spears glittered like frost upon the fields, and shields rang beneath the blows of wrath. Aeneas led his men with steadfast courage, his voice a beacon amid the storm of battle. He fought not for glory, but for the promise that had driven him across the seas, through fire and tempest, through grief and loss. Yet the cost was heavy. Friends fell beside him, noble hearts whose names would live in song. Among them was Pallas, young and bright as morning, whose death struck Aeneas like a blade of ice. He vowed vengeance, and his wrath burned like a forge, driving him through the press of war with relentless might. The clash of armies shook the earth. Rivers ran red, and the cries of the dying rose to the indifferent sky. Turnus fought with the fury of a storm, his sword flashing like lightning, his voice a roar that echoed across the plain. Twice they met, and twice the tide of battle swept them apart. But fate drew them together at last, beneath the gaze of gods and men, in a duel that would decide the destiny of nations. The air was heavy with silence as they faced each other, two lions upon the edge of doom. Turnus spoke with pride, his words sharp as steel, and Aeneas answered with calm, his voice deep as the roots of mountains. Then the swords sang, and the earth drank blood. The fight was fierce and long, a tempest of iron and fire. Turnus struck like a thunderbolt, his blade biting deep, but Aeneas stood unyielding, his strength born of sorrow and hope. At last, Turnus fell, his breath ragged, his eyes dark with the shadow of death. Aeneas stood above him, his arm raised for the final blow. In that moment, his heart wavered, for he saw the face of a man, proud yet mortal, and pity stirred within him. But then his gaze fell upon the belt of Pallas, gleaming upon Turnus' side, and wrath surged like a tide. With a cry that shook the heavens, he drove the blade home, and Turnus lay still upon the earth. Thus ended the war, and thus began the dawn of a new age. Aeneas stood upon the field, the wind cold upon his brow, and felt the weight of fate settle upon his soul. He had paid the price, bitter and cruel, yet the promise was fulfilled. From his blood and toil would rise a city greater than dreams, a city whose name would thunder across the world, whose power would outlast the stars. Rome was yet unborn, but its spirit burned in his heart, a flame that no darkness could quench. He walked among the ruins of battle, his steps slow, his thoughts deep. Around him the land lay silent, as if holding its breath for the future. He thought of Troy, of the towers that had fallen, of the faces lost to time, and his eyes grew dim with memory. Yet he did not despair, for every ending is but a seed, and from the ashes of sorrow springs the tree of glory. He lifted his gaze to the horizon, where the sun sank in a blaze of gold, and whispered a prayer to the gods. Then he turned, his cloak stirring in the wind, and walked toward the dawn of destiny. And so, the tale of Aeneas, son of Troy, bearer of fate, came to its close. Yet in truth, it was not an ending, but a beginning, a spark that would kindle the fire of empire, a dream that would shape the world. His name would live in the songs of poets, in the whispers of history, in the stones of cities that rose upon the bones of time. For he was the bridge between what was and what would be, the pilgrim of destiny, the father of a nation that would rule the earth. And though his voice is silent, its echo rolls through the ages, deep as the sea, bright as the stars, eternal as the will of heaven.